Hey, how you doing? This is Adam Post. You know I have some marketing background. There was never a reason for any company associated with a major brand or even a small brand to say we have sexual preferences over here that we want to celebrate for an entire month. So we'll change our logo. We'll change our messaging. We'll only hire certain people for new jobs. We'll make sure we give promotions to people that did not earn them based on merit. None of that ever made any sense, particularly with marketing, because marketing is messaging. Marketing is giving you identity. Imagine if you were someone that saved the world. You'd be a superhero. That's fantastic. Imagine you were someone that was the coolest kid in class. You have to accomplish things like that to really be that person. Absent those accomplishments, what you do have is an ability to associate yourself with a brand item that other people see. There are expensive fashion brands that are considered cool. You can buy a new Maserati. You'd be a cool guy in a new Maserati, or girl, or whatever gender you choose to be. Pretty much guy or girl. And with that association with that brand that you're paying money for, you get identity, culturally approved identity. There is a concept called social proof. It's very, very powerful. It's not just about brands. It's about when people see a certain thing that looks to be true because other people believe it to be true, then they tend to agree with it. And then you get that identity. Here's an example. Sometimes men that have a girlfriend are able to get more girlfriends. Why? Because there's a social proof that you're worth at least having that girlfriend. And then there's competition for you. Similarly with brands, they're selling you identity for money. That's a good business to be in. There's a lot of added value that you can charge over the cost of production because you're giving someone literally the most important thing they could ever want, identity. Yes, it's fleeting, and no, it's not spiritual, but that's what people get when they buy into brands. Also, brands are a way of getting a promise for when you buy something, you buy a product, you know it has a certain level of quality. It's not just a cheap knockoff, no-named version of some product. So at least when you spend your hard-earned money, you know you're getting something. Now mix into that celebrating sexual preferences. That doesn't really work. Why? Because a brand is selling you a specific identity that you're choosing a la carte. You might buy these kinds of shoes. You might buy that kind of car. You might wear these kinds of clothes. Those are your choices. You get to put together your own cultural identity in whatever your social presence is, whatever your social network is, based on the money you choose to spend on established cultural brands. So you can be cool if you have the money to be cool. At least you can sort of appear to be cool. That's all that anyone expects from a brand. They don't expect a brand is actually going to turn them to be cool. So when you mix in sexual preferences with your sneakers or your car or any other kinds of brands, it mixes up and it muddles whatever value you're getting above the cost of production. In fact, it kind of creates an opposite thing because what you're saying is more important than those sneakers, more important than that car, more important than Bud Light, more important than any kind of brand is the fact that you're very open to everyone expressing their different sexual preferences, and that's what you're all about. That's what this agenda was, and that's the agenda that failed. From thatpartplace.com, corporate America pulls back from Pride in 2025, no rainbow logos from big brands as June starts. As opposed to rainbow logos affecting everyone's actual physical logo for pretty much every major brand. That's a big difference. And from fakenewscnn.com, big brands are pulling back on Pride merchandise and events this year. The idea of Pride merchandise, Pride products, and thatpartplace.com has a great one where they show some Pride-themed Star Wars things. Let me show you one of those. Seriously, you're going to make Pride Collection R2-D2s to show that he likes different sexual preferences or he wants to celebrate Pride that has something to do with that particular robot from Star Wars? These things don't mix, and that's why these products don't sell. But it does do damage to the core brand. People don't want to have to think about it. They're asking you to provide them with identity for a price so that you don't have to save the world and so that you don't have to be the coolest kid in class. All you have to do is have the money to associate yourself with what's considered to be culturally a really cool brand. That makes you really cool. That's sort of how consumerism works. The only thing this Pride Association with visual representations of rainbows along with your corporate or your intellectual property brands can possibly bring is embarrassment to the core property because you're convoluting it. You don't see a super straight R2-D2 going out to pick up girls. And maybe that might sell as a joke or something like that. I don't think people really want that necessarily, although a sexy Jabba the Hutt, I might buy something like that. But it's not a good idea to mix brands. And when people do it, they do it very carefully. Sometimes Oreo will mix themselves up with Baskin Robbins or something like that. Or you'll see at Burger King, they'll do a Reese's Pieces version of their product. Those are very carefully considered, and they're complimentary. And they seem like an event. They seem like something special. And it doesn't undermine either of the two brands. Those things are thought through very carefully. They don't just throw them together and say, hey, if we mix Star Wars with gay, what do we get? Gay Star Wars? And who is supposed to buy that? Who wants to say yes? Gay Star Wars, that's what I want people to think of me, and they won't think that way unless I buy this R2-D2 product. It's as if they never thought this through. Or it's as if they were part of some kind of a plan to absolutely destroy the model of identity purchased through consumer products. And that concept alone, being able to buy identity, would be one of the number one threats to consumer culture. Maybe they wanted to get rid of this whole pseudo-capitalism thing that we have in the United States. And from thatpartplace.com, corporate America pulls back from Pride in 2025. No more rainbow logos from big brands. As June kicks off across the United States, many of us Americans have noticed something surprising about corporate social media accounts. They've remained largely silent about Pride Month in 2025. In contrast to prior years, where rainbow banners, themed logos, and celebratory messages appeared all over the place on June 1st, many major brands have yet to make any public acknowledgement of the month-long observance. This phenomenon was first observed on social media by popular streamer Asmongold. Companies that previously led the charge with high-profile campaigns, including Disney, Target, Walmart, Xbox, Microsoft, Starbucks, and Bank of America, have, as of June 3rd, not issued any Pride-specific messaging on their main platforms. And it's one thing to not have any Pride-specific messaging, that's pretty severe. But they're also not messing with their logos and trying to put rainbows in them anymore. While the month is still young, and some posts may appear later, the absence of coordinated June 1st branding stands in stark contrast to what had become an annual tradition in the corporate world. From themed product lines to rainbow variant social media avatars, the first days of June in years past have often brought immediate and prominent displays of support. That's not to say that all companies have stayed silent. Sesame Street, of course Sesame Street, and the official Halo X account both issued brief Pride acknowledgments over the weekend, but their tone was notably more reserved than in previous years. Neither of the two used rainbow branding outside the posts, and their messages were limited to a few lines of general affirmation. Halo took it a step further than most by offering Unity coding visor and emblem cosmetic elements for players. One notable shift came from Rainbow Six Siege, a Ubisoft game that had previously participated in Pride campaigns. On June 1st, the game's official account posted instead about Men's Mental Health Awareness Month, which is important, encouraging fans to check in on one another and emphasizing vulnerability and strength. The post made no mention of Pride. In past years, Ubisoft and its subsidiaries have prominently featured Pride-themed offerings and messaging. That pattern appears to be changing. While no brand has publicly explained the shift in Pride marketing for 2025, marketing analysts and cultural commentators, or some of us who do both, point to several key factors. The most significant may be consumer backlash in prior years, particularly after incidents involving Target and Bud Light. In 2023, we remember it like it was yesterday. Target faced fierce criticism for a Pride-themed collection that included children's gender-affirming apparel and accessories. Very creepy stuff. That sparked boycott calls and viral protests, and also bomb threats from people who didn't like Target removing the items, who were upset to see the plan kind of fall apart. Target ultimately moved some displays to the back of stores and pulled select items. They actually destroyed a lot of the inventory. The controversy coincided with a noticeable dip in Target's stock price and led to tighter controls on future product rollouts. Target produced more than 2,000 different LGBT-themed items specifically for Pride Month, which is to say they put a lot of time, energy, and money into trying to promote this agenda. They also had store-within-store displays pushed up right in front of their stores for when you first came in the store, pushing the agenda. There is no way they spoke to customers in advance and asked them how they felt about it to gauge what their interest level would be. They just went ahead and did it. This is an incredibly huge, expensive effort, and only to push propaganda. There was no customer base that wanted this merchandise. When I say no customer base, maybe there was 1% of the customer base. There certainly wasn't even 30, 50, or 100% of the customer base. It was a massive expense in a product line with absolutely no thought put to the marketing. Bud Light, meanwhile, became a flashpoint after a brief marketing collaboration with Dylan Mulvaney, the biological male who identifies as a female. The campaign, which included a personalized beer can with Dylan Mulvaney's face on it and social media content, triggered an overwhelming backlash from longtime consumers and from distributors who were responsible to sell this beer. There is identity associated with brand when you narrow off and niche an existing national brand into some very small category of wanting to be associated with the kind of people that want to jump into a bathtub with Dylan Mulvaney. You're going to do some damage to that brand. That is what they did. The company's never bouncing back. They certainly lost more than $1 billion in sales. It wasn't about them losing $1 billion in sales. They lost customers that are just not interested in that association. They consider it a violation of trust, and those customers were right. Many people have been buying the beer for a couple of decades. It was part of some of their life moments. And here they go and do this. One of the most devastating things to happen to Bud Light is their loss of taps in restaurants and anywhere where you sell beer on tap. It's not like you can have multiple different brands on tap. Like you can have some ups and you can have some downs. Bud Light had secured spots as what was then the #1 beer in premium places in bars. If a tap isn't selling, the restaurant isn't going to keep it. I covered this even going back 2 years now. Many restaurants, many service locations, bars took out their Bud Light taps and they're never coming back. That's market share you can't get back when the taps go out. They would have to somehow create some massive new demand. And things like that would take more than a miracle to happen. Ain't gonna happen. In the months that followed the initial Bud Light backlash, reports indicate that parent company Anheuser-Busch lost over $1 billion in sales, with some estimates suggesting losses as high as $1.4 billion. There was a lot of losses in sales, but it's not about that 1 year loss in sales. It's about where is the brand now. It's not where it was, and it's never getting back there. Bud Light also lost its status as America's top-selling beer, a title it had held for decades. It was overtaken by Modelo Especial, a Mexican lager. And that brand Modelo is not owned by Anheuser-Busch in the United States. Outside the U.S., sure. Not in the U.S., it's one of their competitors. The Bud Light incident served as a cautionary tale for the rest of corporate America, signaling that some forms of cultural messaging carry financial risk. Dylan Mulvaney had already been a promotional model for Nike and for some other brands, and none of that really blew up. The Bud Light one, though, did blow up. So Bud Light took the heat for the nonsense that they did, but also for everything that came before when people had just finally said, all right, stop it with this already, and it blew up on them. Similarly, Target's timing couldn't be worse. The Bud Light controversy with Dylan Mulvaney absolutely did cause the Target controversy to just be the next one in line. It was one firestorm leading to another firestorm. Target also hasn't recovered. Adding to the unease are the growing concerns from traditional families, many of whom have pushed back against the visibility of Pride content in settings marketed to children. Viral footage from Pride parades has circulated widely, showing young children interacting with scantily clad adults, performers, or individuals wearing inappropriate outfits. While these clips may not represent official or sanctioned events, they've been used to highlight perceived boundaries being crossed, fueling calls for brands to step back from cultural advocacy. Retailers and family-friendly brands like Disney and Walmart, once leaders in Pride messaging, may now be recalibrating to avoid alienating large segments of their customer base, particularly as cultural and political divisions deepen. With 2024's election in the rearview mirror and a dramatically reshaped political landscape in 2025, companies may be intentionally avoiding controversial social messaging as they assess the national mood. Analysts suggest the move could be less about abandoning a cause and more about returning to a neutral, brand-safe position amid intensifying consumer scrutiny. There was never a time to jump onto whatever the progressive, cultural, social movement was and to incorporate all of your brands with that movement. It has never happened in the United States, at least not in my lifetime. I can't recall a time it's ever been done. It was really like part of what was intended to be a political coup. The coup did not work out. People just said no. And amazingly, once you say no and you don't support this kind of craziness, and when I say craziness, I mean you don't put cultural events mixed with marketing brands and marketing identity. You don't try to take a brand identity and give it social sexual characteristics. It's completely ridiculous. How could that be appropriate for sneakers or for beer? It's not appropriate. Would it be appropriate for condoms? Yeah, maybe it might be. I've never marketed those before. At least it's adult-oriented. Shareholder pressure may also be playing a role. In an environment where quarterly profits are closely tied to brand perception, companies may be prioritizing stability over social visibility, even if they were previously burned by boycotts or public criticism. Can you even imagine how much money it costs to establish a nationally recognized valuable brand, and a valuable brand being one that you could take a commodity cost produced product like a sneaker that might cost $2 to make for the physical item, but then with your brand attached, it's now worth $100 or $200? That doesn't come free. That isn't something you can just snap your fingers and do. That's something you have to risk money to try to establish, and then sometimes it takes years to establish that. You cannot mix that with other brand messaging that's not inherent to your existing brand. That's what these companies have realized. Those two things are actually completely opposite. All you can possibly do is undermine your brand. It's still early in June. Pride 2025 could yet see a wave of branded content, promotional campaigns, or public statements from companies that have traditionally participated. But for now, the first days of June mark a notable shift in tone. Whether it represents a temporary cooling off period or a broader trend towards corporate neutrality remains to be seen. For now, Americans across the spectrum are watching closely, and many are taking note of what's being said and what's not being said. CNN cites an interesting study. From CNN, big brands are pulling back on Pride merchandise and events this year. The study comes from Gravity Research. Companies are treading lightly, avoiding prominent campaigns and visible public support of Pride Month this year. 39% of companies say they plan to scale back Pride Month engagements this year, according to a survey of more than 200 corporate executives by Gravity Research, a risk management advisory. Why do you need risk management if this is good business? Why should it even be a risk? It's just an investment. It's not an investment. It's an enormous risk because you're undermining your relationship with your customers and undermining the value of your brands. The cutting back includes sponsoring Pride events, which they're not doing nearly as much, posting supportive messages of LGBT rights on social media, and selling Pride-themed merchandise. All more things they're just not going to do. Quote, "It's clear that the administration and their supporters are driving the change," said Luke Hardig, the president of Gravity Research. Quote, "Companies are under increasing pressure not to engage and speak out on issues." And when they say speak out on issues, if you want to speak out about how much you love your country and appreciate your freedom, that would not be a problem for most brands. We're talking about the people that feel the opposite way about the country. Those issues, that messaging is a problem because the normal people do not like it. The subdued approach, as CNN calls it, marks a shift for businesses which used to turn the annual June celebration of LGBT Americans into a branded holiday. It's part of a broader pivot in corporate America, with many businesses scrapping some of their programs to advance diversity in the workplace under pressure from the Trump administration and normal people. Because violating the law with DEI and inclusion policies is not something these companies can get away with anymore. These companies have nuked Pride, and the years of promotional models like Dylan Mulvaney ruling supreme over brands are now completely over.